hinges are. When you do a fabric hinge like this, as long as you can maintain this, you don't lose your warp. That's a beautiful hinge. See if I can magically make this climb. Top view. And you can see the tail wheel situation. Right here, I kind of got myself set up and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the tail wheel situation here. This is my first tail wheel, and I really don't know if I want to do what I have in front of me or not, or if I want to feed it through the fuselage. Because once I hinge the rudder, I guess I could do half of it. Once I hinge the rudder, once I install the rudder, I have to install that tail wheel at the same damn time. And once it's on, it's on. So, the way I see it, I should cover the fuselage. Or temporarily hang, that's probably what I'll do. I'll temporarily hang the rudder on the end of the airplane here, so I can keep the tail wheel on it, just to keep it there, and run my rigs out the fuselage. Go ahead and run all my rigs, find out where I'm going to actually do everything, do a mock-up on all this, run my rigs, which I need to do on the inside of the fuselage there. I still have that servo tray in the front to install. That's why I started doing the tail. I need to run my rigs from my tail to that servo tray, install the servo tray. Once I have that situation under control, I should be able to, well, no, then I got myself trapped into doing the upper canopy, and oh my God, we'll figure it out though. My very first tail wheel on my very first tail dragger in my very first problem. I have to somehow work this out, and what I got here is you're supposed to bend this music wire so it can be attached into the rudder, so your tail wheel turns with your rudder. But it has its own access point, which is the little plastic tripod that is supposed to be on that music wire right now, but that's supposed to be put on before you bend it at a 90 degrees. So what to do? Not a good idea if you want to save that music wire. Not a good idea to bend that music wire back to try and get that little plastic piece on, and then bend that music wire back to a 90 degree. That'll be a very weak point. You could end up losing the tail wheel long down the road. So this is one of the reasons why some things take me longer, and I get blamed for either modifying or not following the plan, man. But anyway, what I did is I took some hard block. This is, I think it's basswood. It's a hard block. It's a real hard block, real dense wood, real hard stuff. And I just made my own. I do this a lot. This is what's fun about modeling. I just trace my little black piece out onto the hard block, drilled a hole through it, and made my own little wedge thingamajig. Now, I think I saw something that might end up being a long-term situation way down the road. The fact is, what if you have any tail wheel damage? How exactly are you going to get the tail wheel out? I don't know. I'm kind of throwing shit out in the wind right now. But what I'm going to do to solve this problem now on this one is now I have my own wedge made, a hardwood block wedge made. I'll most likely screw and glue this onto the fuselage, but now I can just cut a little hole on the side of this, slip my music wire in there, and then plug that hole so my wheel will still pick up the load forward and aft without breaking, but I can slide this back in. So I guess I'll end up saving that plastic tail wheel assembly for something else years down the road, I guess. And this is how I'm going to solve the problem. Otherwise, you're going to break your music wire. Just go ahead and make yourself a one. Cut yourself a passage right down the side. Slip your wire in and plug that hole back up and onward. And ta-da! That's what you get. It's mounted on there. It should be perfectly fine. And all I have to do is just glue and mount that on the bottom and onward. So now, basically, I know how to make my own tailwheel mechanisms. If I have the safety wire, the music wire around here, I can make my own. These units are only like $3 a piece, though. But, if you bust them off, it's kind of fun to make your own. But see, I plugged it with some plywood. It spins in there perfectly fine. Okay, here we are on day 59, I think. Starting to lose track. This is Sunday. Tomorrow will be 60, so I think that's right. Here I have the servo tray installed, permanently installed. I tried to get as far forward as I could, and my servos are upside down. I've never done this before, and this will probably be how I'll have to do the Bonanza as well, because these have low wings. That's why. Most of my other planes have upper wings, so things are, they're a high wing instead of a low wings. This is a whole little bit different rigging upside down. This is why you notice I still don't have the upper canopy on, because this thing is constantly on its back, and there's no reason to subject that canopy to that kind of damage. Well, anyway, what we got is we got one throttle servo, one rudder servo, one elevator servo, and before I started rigging, I decided I think I'm going to put the receiver, I'm going to tuck it in here, which means if I'm going to make that kind of a decision, I had to start thinking about fuel tank, because the fuel tank's got to get in there, but you don't want to trap it. You don't want to totally enclose it, but it's going to come into play now, so I had to start putting my fuel tank together. Fuel tanks are a little bit different. A couple of times you start getting the knack of it, but the first time it kind of scares you until you kind of catch on, because you have to bend your own tubing to get your vents out and that. So here's, I can manage to get a decent view on this. The fuel tank, I have it completed. I ain't bothered showing you how to put it together because each fuel tank's a little bit different. But you have just a basic block or tank. That's a 12 ounce there. And then you're going to have the plug-in assembly and everything that's going to go on the inside of this. You got the clunk, which is just a weighted down portion that stays, like if you're upside down, it stays with the gravity, And then this tube here is your vent tube, which you route this to your muffler in order to get a pressure to your tank. You want to try and maintain a pressure to your tank at all times. That way, if you're upside down, you don't starve your motor. Or you could just put a pump on the motor, and if you put a pump on it, then you end up with a positive pressure all the time. That gets to be expensive, and I haven't had a need for it yet, but we'll find out. If we get into maybe putting a smoker into this thing, it'd be fun to put a smoker into this while you're doing aerobatics. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and put the tank together, install it, and then start going with the rigs on these servos that I just showed you in there. I'm going to route I'm going to start routing to the tail. We have the rudder hanging on by a couple of hinges. Not permanently installed yet. I haven't made that decision yet. And the tail wheel assembly is completed, but it's not installed either. I'm kind of waiting for the right moment to tell me to actually do it, because I'm going to trap everything. All that will stay on there, and then when I start covering, I'm either going to cover around it, or I'm going to install it after I cover the fuselage, that is. The tail's already covered. Here's the top side of the fuselage without the canopy. Another good reason why the canopy isn't on, as you can see, the servo situation. They're being upside down, and then you're capable of seeing what's going on the top side. You can route the wires, make sure everything's going to stay where you want it to stay. And you can see all the way down the fuselage, so you can do your rigs, make sure that it's not hitting anything, maybe put in some bearing bulkheads and that. So that's top side. So I brought this up anyway. Got the feeling I'm either going to get hooked on doing the engine mount now as I'm doing the fuel tank, or we'll see how it goes. I'd really like to get the rigs done though. But while you're doing the fuel tank, and once you obligate yourself to installation of the fuel tank, you might as well just go with the entire fuel system, less a couple of things. I don't have a quick fueling device yet. Those get to be a little expensive, about 12 bucks, 15 bucks, somewhere around there, I think, depending on what you want. I haven't decided what I want yet. You're looking at the firewall right now, and if you're going to install the fuel tank, you might as well decide where those the hoses are going to come out. You want your fuel tank to be at the same level, if not just a tad higher than your carburetor. My carburetor on this one's going to be almost the same as it would be normally, but I'm going to have to flip it 90 degrees. So I think I can maintain the same height of my fuel tank. I should be alright. But the fuel tubing, the feed is going to come out of the top. So I believe I'm going to end up everything's going to come right out of here. Right out of dead center. Maybe I'll go right dead center. Not... I'll give this a little bit more thought, but this is something you have to think about now when you're doing the fuel tank, so you know where your lines are going to go, because you want to really block, like, the front of this fuel tank now. You can see the fuel tank. The front of the fuel tank, you're going to want to put a block of balsa or something forward of that to keep it held against the fuselage. That way when you nosedive into the ground, you biff it, you don't end up shoving all your fuel lines, your fuel tubing and everything. You don't destroy this. The fuel tank itself is pretty rugged. So if you can just prevent all of your lines and everything from getting damaged, you most likely can walk away from the crash, unless it was like really serious then. But a lot of people run into fuel leaks, fuel problems and everything for the simple reason is they do so many crashes and they eventually destroy their tank because they didn't secure the tank. A really good idea. Save your scraps. Always save your scraps. Balsa, hardwood, plywood, miscellaneous parts that you get off of, I got a boneyard that I call a boneyard that is other aircraft that hadn't survived, but you got the parts off of them, you scarfed the parts in it. Always keep your scraps. Right now I'm going to go ahead and start installing a tank, or put a cradle in there for the tank. All you do, just go to your scrap box. This is about 5 years worth of scrap. You really don't get that much scrap, but if you save it over time, this box is slowly getting to be rather deep now. All different shapes, sizes, triangular shapes, squares, blocks, thin, thick, Same with plywood. And I keep them separate. There's plywood. You don't usually get as much plywood scrap as you do balsa scrap. Keep your scraps. Don't throw anything away. It makes the hobby cheaper and cheaper. All the scraps that you keep are excellent for rebuilding planes after you drill them into the ground as well. A61. I'm going to go back to rigging the tail. What you got to do now when you start rigging tails anyway, you usually don't have this problem when you're trying to do wings and such, because wings tend to have a little bit different type of rig. I mean, wings are different. Anyway, we're going to go rigging this tail. First off, just follow a lot of your blueprint measurements. This here is just a little bit different again because we have to do a build-up because of the fabric situation. Fabric situation is the fabric's going to go over the top of these ribs and give you the illusion of going over an infrastructure, or it's an illusion of when the fabric goes over that it's actually fabric over a frame that is welded together. Anyway, we're going to have to put a filler block in here, so I'm going to have to locate the horn right here, and we want to locate it right at the tail wheel bracket because that's going to be one of your strongest areas, and you want to be able to have just as strong of a push and pull on that tail wheel as you do at the rudder at the same time. I was wondering if I shouldn't have built that area up, but I guess we'll find out over time. I think it should be alright. I might still want to build that area up. I'll still make that decision when I start actually doing rigs here. But we're going to locate the horn, and then we're going to follow that on a straight line all the way up to the servo up in the front. And then we're going to blast a hole right here, and we're going to route this through here. And we're going to do a push-pull rod situation with dowels. Looking at right now is the actual first rig that I do have, or how should I say, this is what I got now. This has not been a good day. You got your basic horn in your rudder there. You got it so it can travel at damn near perpendicular to the hinge line. You want to make sure that, because if you have a horn at an angle, if you watch it rock back and forth, it's got like a swooping sensation. I mean, it's like it'll scarf out of the bottom or scarf out of the top. Once you see it, you'll recognize it. I mean, you want to make sure that you're talking 90 degrees as the whole turn is happening there. Okay, and then we got a big old hole ogged out of the side of the fuselage. And I have my first rod made. I had to back off a little bit and get rid of the date and that off of the view there. What you got is just pretty much just a square dowel. It's square balsa. What is this, about 3/8? I don't know. And then you got a rod with a clevis that's going to hook up to your horn, and then you're just going to try and get this rod or the dowel in the center line of the two. Just kind of compromise. Make sure there's no hits or anything. And now we have to rig the other end, so we're going to have to hook another clevis up. But I'm going to do a Z-bend down here. And you can see I have a preload condition how my rod, it's preloaded over to one side. So I'm going to have to find neutral on that rudder up there. Keep it at neutral. Just usually just put a stick across it or whatever. Probably go off the vertical off the top and just square it up. And then do a little tweaking in here to get this rod down to my outboard servo here in order to run that without any kind of a preloaded condition. You want to don't have any drag. You want to try and get no drag whatsoever on any of your rigs, because all you do is steal from reaction time of your servos and eat on your batteries. And you can see down on the bottom there, I've had some mock-up of my battery. My fuel tank and my battery mock-up is in the bottom down in there. See if we can get a closer view. That's just a mock-up right now. It'll probably get modified a little bit. I got to think about a refueler for refueling the tank, and got to think about where the receiver is going to go. And I think I need a remote switch too. I got to get a remote switch in there. So I got the rudder almost rigged. Rudder ain't going to be much of a problem. And then I'll go to elevator. Elevator will be even easier. And then tail's rigged, and I'm going to have to start thinking about what I'm going to do with the motor. And whether I like it or not, I think I'm going to have to take the motor off of my Trainer 60, which is no big. It's a bummer having one motor. But at a $230 motor, that's shit happens.